Hello and welcome to my desk here at Worship Tutorials HQ. Now this is a video that many of you have requested many times over, and that is building a Helix patch in real time. We're gonna build a Helix patch from scratch. I'm gonna show you a lot of the tricks that Bradford and I use when we build patches here at Worship Tutorials. A few things before we get started. You'll notice that I am wearing headphones. And the reason is, everybody's quarantined to their own houses at this point. So, hey, I hope you're doing good, by the way. My family is downstairs, so I'm just going to go in headphones. I don't usually build patches and make tones with headphones, but it's certainly possible. But it brings up the first point. What you monitor through is very important. Typically, I use, you can see one here, these biodynamic, I think they're 7-inch monitors. That's what I use. I plug my Helix, which is right down in front of me. You can't see it, but it's right here. I plug my Helix floor into my Universal Audio, you can't see that either, Universal Audio Apollo via XLR, and then I'm just using the headphone out of the Apollo here, or I can go to monitors or whatever. But what you monitor through is very important. It can greatly impact both your experience with the Helix and the end result of the sounds that you make. So get some good sounding studio monitor or studio headphones. These are biodynamic 880s, I think. I've had them forever. And so just something that sounds accurate and sounds good. That will get the job done. Okay, I am using my MJT thin line Telecaster. I hesitate to say that there is a guitar that is my favorite, but this is the one I play the most. And I have gone on record saying Tellies are the greatest guitars of all time. So I use this guitar to build most every patch, and then we tweak them with other guitars after we have them done. So it really doesn't matter what you use. A few notes about global settings. Lots of questions get asked about global settings. I'm going to try and inject as much like tips and tricks into this video when it comes to Helix as I can that are appropriate along the way. Global pad, on or off? Well, that depends on your guitar and your pickups. Most guitars that we use, we keep the global pad off. If you turn the pad on, it lowers the input basically and knocks the level down. So if you have a guitar with really hot output pickups or active pickups, you're going to want to use that. Let me just pull you into HX Edit over here. You can see that when I make a patch, I typically leave this to multi, or you can set it to guitar. I leave the input as auto. You can change this if you want, depending on your guitar. I typically leave it to auto. All right, so let's get started. The first thing that I will do, and that you should do, is use both paths. So you can set this path to 2A, and that will connect the two paths. So now the signal goes here, and then it comes in here, and then it goes out. Output, I typically leave as multi as well. All right, if you want, you can change that so it just uses XLRs, just uses 1/4 inch. But I set it to multi. That's how I leave them typically. All right, the reason you do this is because each path is one DSP chip. So if you only try and fill up the first path and you run out of DSP, it's not that you're out of DSP completely, it's just that this path is out of DSP, and then you need to use the other one. All right, so the first thing I do is connect the paths. The next thing I do is enter a volume pedal in here. So you just go volume pan. I just keep it mono at this point. Here's something about the volume pedal. When you put it in there, it automatically assigns the expression toe button. So that's on the expression pedal. If you push it all the way down, it hits a button. Automatically assigns that to turn the volume block on and off. So I don't like that at all. I don't want to turn the volume block on and off. I actually just did it there as I was trying to demonstrate. So I will set that to none. The volume position, which is the level, is set to EXP2. I like to leave it there. You would either want to set it 1 or 2. I like to set it at 2. The other thing about the volume pedal is I like to set the curve to logarithmic. A log curve looks like this rather than a linear curve. I prefer logarithmic. I think that feels better, especially for swells, because it's more of a subtle ramp with the expression pedal, but that's really up to you. You can do what you want. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is put in the core components of my tone. So that's going to be the amp, the cab, the compressor, and the end of the chain EQ. So I like to come over here and let's put the amp in. Now I didn't say this earlier, but basically what we're going to be doing here is rebuilding the free AC30 patch that you can get at Worship Tutorials. Link below. It's going to hopefully sound about the same in the end. I'm going to build it with this guitar, so it'll sound perfectly tuned for this guitar, at least in the time that it takes us to build it. I'm just going to use the AC30, the A30 Fawn normal amp. I'm going to put, I'm actually going to move it over because I'm going to do a little experiment here with you guys. I'm going to put in a cab block, stock cab block. When I do that, I like to go dual. I just think you can get more variety of tone. So the AC30, you got to have the Celestian blue, that's the bluebell. And then for the other side, I like to use, let's use a silver bell. Those are both of the Vox sort of flavors. So I'm a fan of pairing a dynamic mic with a ribbon mic. So let's put the ribbon mic on the blue. Why not? 160. And then let's use the 7 dynamic for the silver. And I'm going to put the distance. I like them up close. I typically do high cuts around 6.5K. And then I'll just use my ears from there. Same with low cuts, somewhere around 80-ish. And then you go from there. So there's my amp and cab. So the first thing is you want to play this and just hear what it sounds like. Now, that doesn't sound bad. Just stock settings straight out of the gate. Sounds pretty good. Now, the reason I have this level showing over here, this is the software that you use with the Apollo. So this is what my Helix is going into. The way that I have the gain structuring set up on my Apollo is in my cleanish sound. I like to see that peak around -9 dB. That's right where my mouse is right there, -9. So I know that the level of this amp has to come up. The other thing about this amp that I know from experience is the master volume changes the tone. It's not just a volume level. So the master level, it's like the whole volume on an amp. As you turn it up, things change. And I like to run it around somewhere between 8 and 9, 8.5. Sometimes on these amps, when you turn them all the way up, they kind of like, they start to fall apart, but not in a really good way. So Marshall amps are notorious for this. You don't want to turn them all the way up, or it's like they're way too bassy. You know, so play with the master levels, and then you use the channel volume to set overall volume. So I'm going to set this. The master is going to sit here around, I don't know, 8-ish, 7.5, 8-ish. Then I'm going to use the channel volume to. That's about right. You see how that's peaking right around -9? That's pretty good. So from here, what I like to do is set the gain level on the amp, and it's actually pretty good. It's about where I want it, stock settings. So when I'm on the bridge pickup like I am now, and I strum hard, I want the amp to break up a little bit. I don't want it to be super clean. So if we turn it up more, that's too much, although that does sound good. If we turn it down, that's way too clean and wimpy sounding, right? So it's like, and this will affect how everything sounds when you start pushing it with overdrive. So getting this set right is important. So if you're downloading patches or building your own patches, it's one of the first things I do is go to the gain level on the amp and set it so that it's just starting to break up. And you can still go to the middle position. That's still pretty clean. But you can hit it hard on the bridge position and it breaks up. So I like that, right around 5.5, somewhere in there. And then from there, I'll just kind of dial in the amp to where it sounds good to me. Okay, so that's about the right amount of bass. I mean, it just depends on your guitar. How bright do you want it? You know, if you turn this all the way up, that's a little bright, a little fizzy. The other thing is on these AC30s, they have this cut control. The higher you turn cut, the more high end you're rolling off. It's cutting it off. So as you turn it up, you'll lose that high end. See, that's way too dark. But one thing you might find out is you can turn treble up to where it feels way too bright, but then turn cut up and it feels pretty good. Like, that's not bad. I feel like I need a little bit, I want a little bit more gain. I'm gonna go up to about 6. That feels pretty good. Kind of right in there. And we can come back and make tweaks later, of course, as we get things going. Presence you can think of as a second high or a second treble. It's actually typically it's a little higher on the frequency spectrum, so it's just another high control for you. I'm not hearing like a huge difference between 0 and 10 actually. That sounds pretty good. Sag is going to kind of adjust the feel of the amp. You can, if you turn it down, it's going to feel stiffer. And when people say the feel thing, that's definitely where you'll feel this. But people who say that like these digital modelers don't feel like the real thing, they do if you take some time to really tweak it. So if you want it to have like more give and feel like the tubes are really kind of, you can turn that sag up and you'll get that. The other thing I like to look at is the bias. So you can hear where you're kind of getting the fullest body out of it. It's kind of right in here. I should also note before we get too far into this, you're not gonna hear any outstanding playing. When I make these patches, I play pretty simple stuff. Just basically chords or some power chords, maybe a few lead lines. Okay, that's feeling pretty good. Just amp and cab. The next thing I'll do is put a compressor in. I did say we were gonna do an experiment with the cab, that's coming. All right, compressor, deluxe comp. I like to set the threshold somewhere around 38, minus 37. I like the compression to be a 4:1. You can go 3:1. If you want less compression, obviously you can come down 2:1, 3:1. 4:1 feels pretty good. If you go higher, it starts to get a little squishy for me. This attack setting is sort of how long it takes before the compressor attacks the signal. So higher will let like your initial attack come through. Let me try and demonstrate this. And if you turn it way down, I don't know how well that comes through, but it's kind of squelching it when it's all the way down. If you turn it up a little bit, it's a lot more punchy. So I like that. I don't like a long release. I say short, it's 300 milliseconds versus a 60 millisecond attack. So, but this is kind of like where I like to set it. I kind of, I like compressors. When I used pedal compressors, I always enjoyed the ones that had a mix control. So I'll run it at like 80% typically. Sometimes you could go all the way down to 50. Sounds pretty good. I enjoy subtle compression. So the deluxe compressor does two things for me. One, it evens things out a little bit. I don't like things to sound really squishy. You can use like the red squeeze. What did I do? I changed stuff. You can use the red squeeze if you want that, or the kinky comp will do the really squishy kind of thing. The deluxe comp is a much more subtle kind of compression. It feels more like studio kind of compression, like an LA2A or something like that. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to be, but that's how it feels to me. So, and then the other thing is with level, I like to set the compressor so that when you turn it off and turn it on, it doesn't give you a volume boost or drop. A lot of times compressors can can fool you because when you turn them on, you get a level increase, and louder almost always sounds better to you. Your ears can be deceived. So I like to turn it on and off and make sure that the level isn't really changing a lot. It might get a little louder, and that's okay. So here's off. So you heard a thing come in when I turned it on, but like when I actually played it, it wasn't any louder. It's just a little more even. It kind of thickens it a little bit, which is something that a really good compressor will do. They sort of inject their own inherent tone into the mix. Okay, the last thing I do for just my core tone components is I like to put an EQ at the end of the chain. So the EQ and the compressor together can give you options for multiple guitars. So if you have a guitar that's darker, you can use this EQ to brighten things. You can obviously do that on the amp as well. If you have a guitar that has really high output pickups, you can lower the level of the compressor right here, and it will send less level to the amp. That's nice. Likewise, if you have a guitar with lower output pickups, you can raise this level and sort of use that level setting on the compressor to even things out between different guitars. You can even set that to a button or a snapshot if you want, and just preset it for different guitars. So that's a nice thing you can be able to do. Okay, so I really like the simple EQ. I used to use the Cali EQ a lot. I think it sounds great, but the simple EQ, just because it's simple, it actually sounds really good, and there's way less to goof around with in it. I just found that it's really fast to get good sounds quickly. So I'll just play a little bit. You know, maybe pull some low end off a little bit. Maybe. But really the magic is in the mid-range. So I typically change this mid-frequency to somewhere between 1.6 and 2.4, somewhere in there. Depends on the amp and the guitar. But then boost that mid-range, and don't be afraid to boost it like 3 dB. You hear how much that improved everything? That's going to really help you sit well in a mix, that EQ trick right there. And then if you want some more high end, you can add it in. Now, if you'll notice with all of this EQing, it raises the volume. So I like to pull the volume down. So when I turn it off and turn it back on, it's the same level, right? So here's off. And you can see where the level is right here. That's why it's nice to have something that shows you levels. Line 6 did tell us that in firmware 2.9, they're giving us metering on the Helix, which is going to be nice. All right, it's probably going to be out if you're watching this video, maybe down the road. Who knows? That'll be a nice addition. But you can see here, when the EQ's off, I'm still peaking it around -9. When I turn it on, I've lowered it by 2 dB. It's about the same, so that's about right. Okay, now let's do our cab experiment, and then we'll move forward. So I'm a big fan of IR cabs. So the stock cab obviously sounds really good. All right, but I like IRs. So my buddy Jonathan over at Tone Junkie sent me a whole bunch of new IRs. So I'm just gonna pull one of these up. I've already tried it out, and then I can tell you it sounds awesome. It's this Alnico Silver, which is his 1960s Vox AC10 with silver bells in it. 10-inch speakers on this one. And I tried this combination of his fathead mic that he uses, and he has a vintage Shure SM545. Plug that thing in there, and it's way louder. So I'll pull the volume down so that it was about the same. So there we are, we're peaking at about -9 again. That's where I want to be. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign both of these to a foot switch, and I'm going to toggle between the two of them. That's an easy way to A/B something while you're building a patch. So I'm putting them both on foot switch 7. So I can just I can hit this button and watch what happens in here in HX Edit. See, it turns the IR on and the cab off, and then likewise. So this is the IR. This is the cab. So immediately you can hear that the IR is smoother, thicker, just has a different mid-range character that I like more, and it still retains the clarity in the high end. I'll play it again. This is the stock cab. I like the IR, I'm keeping it. Stock cabs, you're all right, but you're going away in this patch. All right. So that is the IR from his 66 Alnico Silver pack. Highly recommended. You can pull the low cut in the IR if you want to get rid of some of that low end. I'm going to set it around 73. Oh, my thumb moved it. This magic mouse gives you problems sometimes. All right. The high cut, you can set it. Obviously, if you pull it way down, this high cut actually does work. Sometimes it feels like it doesn't do much, but it does. And the reason you would do low cuts and high cuts is naturally a guitar speaker in a cabinet will have a very significant drop on the high end, around 5 or 6K. So don't be afraid if you're feeling like it sounds really kind of fizzy, which I don't in this situation. Don't be afraid to pull that high cut down to like 5K. See, even at 4.3K, it doesn't feel like I'm losing a lot of high end, but I also don't feel like I need it. Like I don't hear anything that I want to get rid of. So I'll probably set it around 6.5K. That sounds pretty good. So we've got our bass tone. We got the compressor, the amp, the cab, and the EQ. And let's build from here, and then we can come back to this stuff and tweak it if we want. So the next thing I would do is let's put some wet effects in. Actually, let's save this thing before we start doing that. Let's save it as build a patch. All right, we're good. Build a patch WT. The next thing, you're probably getting tired of hearing D, A, E, but this is how I build stuff. All right, this is more about the tone than the playing. So the next thing I would add is delays and reverbs. Let's talk about where they are in the signal chain. I find for the Helix that putting your wet effects after the amp typically always sounds better. We've tried putting wet effects in front of the amp. Our Chime 30 patch is an example of that, but I just think they sound better after. I don't know why that is, because there are a lot of great players who put wet effects in front of the amp and they sound great, but I've tried it in the Helix and I can't quite recreate that sound. So I like to put them after. I think it keeps the wet effects cleaner and more, you hear them more in the mix, which is a good thing. So we're gonna make everything stereo here. One thing that's important to note about your stereo and mono stuff is once you enter something in stereo, you gotta keep the whole chain in stereo. That's why this EQ, is not stereo, it's mono. We gotta change it. Let's remember what we did. Minus 1.3, 2K, plus 3, plus 2. Okay, because it's gonna reset our settings. I wish it didn't do that, line 6. So minus 1.3, this mid was at 2K, it was like plus 2-ish, plus 3, I don't remember, plus 2, and then minus 2 dB to keep the level about the same. You can always just play again and see how it sounds. Doesn't sound exactly the same to me, but it's still pretty good. All right, so I don't know where it was. Somewhere in there. That's pretty good. Let's do our delays. Now, like I said, once you go in stereo, you have to keep everything after it in stereo or it will sum to mono. And you don't want that. Unless, well, you might want that, but if you're going stereo, you probably want it to be stereo. All right, so let's add a tape delay for a quarter note delay. I really like the tape delay here. Where is it? Transistor tape, there we go. So the first thing you do is turn your trails on. And then you click this button to make it to your tempo. Let's change our tempo to like 90. All right, so now we've got a quarter note delay. Okay. First thing I'll do is feedback with a quarter note delay. I like it to last about 1 measure. So you want your initial attack and then 3 repeats. That's in 4/4 time. So 1, 2, 3, That's a little high on the feedback. 1, 2, 3. That's pretty good. By the time it gets to 4, it's pretty quiet. This wow and flutter, I don't like it as much as they set it in the stock settings. So when it comes to stereo delays, I'm going to show you a trick about how you can make any stereo delay a dual delay. And it has to do with the scale and the spread. So the scale, if you change it from 100, you will get multiple delays. There you go. So if you want to keep it as a quarter delay, set the scale to 100. Spread to 10, that will spread it as wide as it can go. Okay, and that's a little hot on the mix for me. I love this tape delay, it sounds so good. So somewhere around 25% works for me on this one. So it's quiet enough that it stays out of your way, but yet when you stop playing, it kind of washes underneath. All right, that'll work. Why don't we just assign that to a button while we're at it? So we're gonna go foot switch 1, call it quarter delay. Okay, so the next thing I want is a dotted eighth note delay. For that, I am a fan of the vintage digital delay. Of course, you can use whatever delay you like here in the Helix. Another favorite is the Adriatic delay, but that I don't like that as much for dotted eighth, because dotted eighth, you want to be able to hear it stick out in the mix. And I think the vintage digital does a good job of that. And it has modulation on board too, which is cool. So again, we're gonna set the tempo to dotted eighth. So if you notice, there were 2 delays going around in there. That is the scale. The scale was set at whatever it was set, something besides 100, so you got multiple delays. Oh, I changed the depth of the modulation. It went crazy. So now we've got a dotted eighth delay. Okay, that's pretty hot in the mix. The vintage digital gives you a pretty loud repeat. Somewhere around there, around 34, 35. I like more feedback on a dotted eighth delay. Something like that, so it kind of keeps going. Now, the way you voice the dotted eighth delay, and that mix feels pretty good too, is with the bit depth and the sample rate. This is how you voice the, I should say, the vintage digital delay. So if you set it to 24 and 48, you're gonna get the highest fidelity. So your repeats are gonna have all of the fidelity of the initial note. Well, there's some modulation. I'll turn that modulation off. We'll get to that in a bit. Okay, so as you lower these levels, it will pull top end off and degrade the signal. So if you lower bit depth all the way down, it gets pretty nasty. You hear that it's almost like distortion. I don't like that. That might be something you go for in a delay and a particular sound, but I don't like that. I like to keep the bit depth around 16 or 24. You're not gonna get that. Okay, you can see even turning it from 24 to 16, the repeats are starting to degrade a bit, but it's in a much more pleasant way. And then the sample rate will, as you lower it, things get darker. So if I go all the way down to 8 kilohertz, they're really dark, really warm. So if you want these delays to kind of sit underneath and not draw a lot of attention to themselves with the digital delay, it almost sounds like tape at that point. Personally, I like going down to like maybe 24, 16. See, even at 16, it keeps a lot of the fidelity, which is nice for a dotted eighth delay. That sounds pretty good for the dotted eighth delay. So we'll assign this to foot switch 2, excuse me. Okay, so the next thing I want is we didn't talk about modulation. Let's go in here and talk about modulation. So the rate, I like to keep the rate, you can turn the depth all the way up and play. It's doing some crazy stuff, so I don't like a lot of that, but some of it could be nice. If you want your delays to kind of swirl a little bit. So there you can kind of hear it coming in, but it's very subtle. Well, let's keep it there. That sounds good. Okay, save. Always save a lot. All right, so the next thing let's do is pull in a dual delay. Told you I would show you a trick. So you can use the dual delay and just set left time, right time, set everything up separately. But you can actually take any delay. So let's go back to the tape delay because I told you it was a favorite. And let's set it to be a dual delay. So set the time at 1/4, set the spread to 100. Set the, I want this to be a pretty prominent sounding delay, so we'll turn this up to like, 50%, why not? A lot of feedback. Now, if you just play this, it's going to be a quarter note delay. That sounds good. All right, as it keeps on going and going and going. Maybe not that much feedback. Maybe not that much mix. All right, so now when you change the scale, you're going to make it a dual delay. So if you have a quarter note set and then you change the scale to 75%, you would get a quarter note and a dotted eighth note in stereo bouncing back and forth because your spread is up. So you notice what you hear there is doon, doo doon, doon, doo doon, doon, doo doon, doon, doo doon. You've got a quarter and dotted eighth ping-ponging back and forth in stereo. It's pretty cool. You can do that with any delay in the stereo settings. Sounds pretty good. So setting it at quarter note scale 75% gives you quarter dotted eighth. If you set the first note at dotted eighth and change the scale to 60, you would want 66.666, but if you change it to 67%, you will get eighth and dotted eighth. So it's kind of the same pattern, but just faster. I actually really like that for lead stuff, like lead lines for like the really wet, heavy lead line stuff in praise and worship. That sounds good. That's going to be our dual delay. I'm going to set that to foot switch 3, dual delay. All right, so delays are done, at least the main 3 delays that I always use in these patches. Swells is another thing we'll get to in a bit. Next, let's go reverb. So the first thing I like is a more subtle reverb. And if you go to the legacy, don't neglect the legacy stuff here. Actually, there's some great legacy delays that are available. I haven't used them in a while, but I know they sound really good. Like from the old DL4, is that the delay thing? The big green thing. They're all in there. The old M series pedals, all that good stuff is there. I like a hall reverb. I actually like to set the time pretty high, like around 5. Turn the trails on. Pre-delay is gonna determine how long before the reverb kicks in. So if you turn it way up, you'll hear this. Did you hear there was a delay before the came in? I like to set, you don't need a lot of pre-delay for like a more subtle reverb, but you can set it maybe there. How you voice this reverb is going to be in your low cut and your high cut. Turn this up, you're gonna pull low end out, so it's gonna make it brighter sounding or thinner. Pull the high cut down, means you're cutting all these highs out, and it tells you what frequency here. That'll darken it, so. That's pretty dark. If you pull this up, it's way brighter. So I like to darken these. All right, that sounds pretty good to me. And maybe actually a little longer and then a little less mix, just so it kind of sits underneath and just has a little wash. You just want to sense that you're in a space with this thing. So this is plate verb. Let's put it on foot switch 4. Why not? Just call it. Did I say plate? I meant hall. That's what that is. All right, so we're building the patch. We've got our foot switches are being populated. Sounds pretty good. All right, the next thing, big ambient reverb. My go-to for this is, remember, keep it in stereo. Is this one in stereo? Yeah, Legacy is always in stereo. All right. Keep it in stereo, go with Glitz. Turn the time to like around 6.5. You want a little bit of pre-delay with this. You want a little bit of low cut. Same with the high cut. Mix, I know from experience, I want around 20 or 22. Turn the trails on. That's pretty big. The way that you can voice this one is with the high cut, obviously, again. That made it darker. See, that's brighter. So maybe around here somewhere. But these, the rate, depth, crossover, and mod mix will give you a lot of control. Listen to what happens with this mod mix. So if it's all the way off, it's got a lot of body to it. If you turn it up, it pulls all that body out, and it's much more of a wispy thing. So that could be something that you could use to dial in. You're gonna wanna bring in more mix if you use that. But I like to set it around here, maybe a little more low cut. Obviously then you're gonna wanna play with this, not just rake your strings. So. Little sour note action there. That's still a lot, maybe too much. It depends on how much you like this reverb. Let's play with these settings. So lowering this mod mix kind of helped me feel like it sat a little better in the mix with when I was playing. Feels pretty good. All right, so Glitz is done. Let's put it right below the hall verb. So we'll have the hall on top and the Glitz on the bottom. I think that would put it on foot switch. Oh, what am I doing? Foot switch, what, 10? I guessed right. So that's gonna be Glitz on foot switch 10. Okay, so we've got some wet effects. Let's turn on our quarter delay and our hall verb, and now let's build some drive. All right, so I like to typically use 3 overdrives, and I like to sort of cascade them in gain. The first one that I love to use since firmware 2.8 came out is the Heir apparent, which is the king of tone, one side of the king of tone. I know kind of from experience that I want to go the lower gain mod or the normal gain mod. Not quite as much. Well, with the lower mod, you want a little more gain. Probably want to turn the tone up so it's a little brighter. The next thing you do is just play it, see how it sounds. The King of Tone sounds awesome, and to me, I want it a little brighter, so maybe try the presence up a little bit. Gotta turn my volume up. I'm gonna put it on a foot switch and turn it on and off so I can hear it. One thing that I want to do is clear the foot switch 7 assignment. That's where the IR thing was. So I'm just gonna go right click on that. This is a neat trick too. In HX Edit, you can clear that assignment. And then I'm gonna add this to foot switch number 7. I don't know why it's still showing up there, but I've added it. Now it says Heir apparent, good, okay. So I'm gonna turn it on and off and get a feel for if it's set up like I like it. That sounds good. All right, so Heir parent is done. First stage is done. All right, next one I always typically like to put in is a tube screamer. I'm a sucker for the tube screamer. It's my all-time favorite drive in the world. With these drives, Heir parent was this way, kind of. I like to set the gain low and the output or the level high. So you're using the level of the drive to push the amp into overdrive, and you're getting more of the tone from the amp, although the pedal is imparting its own tone on it as well. But that's how I like to run these things, rather than putting the gain up. Sounds pretty good. Yeah, somewhere around 2.5. This will be sort of my big rhythm drive, so that's how I want it to sound. I'm gonna put it on foot switch 8 so I can turn it on and off. Sounds pretty good. All right, so that's done. The last thing I like to have is, you could, if you wanted to, have another sort of low gain. Like I like to do a Timmy and a Heir apparent and a tube screamer. Sometimes it's fun to throw a bigger sounding distortion-ish kind of a thing. In 2.8, Helix or Line 6 put out this Dhyna drive that sounds pretty awesome. So I kind of set it the same way. Well, I'm going to set the drive a little higher. Let's see what this sounds like. I mean, not bad. It's different than the, it's noisy. It's different than the tube screamer. I'll put it on the next foot switch so I can goof with it a little bit. I'll turn on the different drives and let you hear how they all kind of sound. So this is clean. So one thing I'll do with all these drives on to test like how they stack is pull up like the typical praise and worship lead tone that I use, which is going to be the Glitz Reverb, the dual delay, and like stage 1 and stage 3. So the Heir apparent and the Dhyna drive, and just play it. That's how you know it's going to be good right there when you hear that. And just play something and see how it sounds. So this is what it would sound like. That's not bad. Try it with the screamer and the Dhyna drive. That's a lot of gain. They sound pretty similar. I think the tube screamer makes it a little creamier sounding. Whether or not that's what you want. You can also try and put the tube screamer after the Dhyna drive and see how that sounds. Not bad. I'll probably put it back in front. You can think of whatever is last as sort of imparting their character on the tone last, I guess. I don't know if that, you just experiment. Now, the question I have that I would ask myself is, if I use something different like a Timmy, and I turned all 3 of them on, King of Tone, Timmy, and Tube Screamer, would that give me a better like lead tone than just the Dhyna drive with one of the other 2? And that's something you would have to experiment with on your own, that I would if I were going to go down the road on this patch. A lot of times when you turn on like all the overdrives, things get pretty mushy pretty fast. So but I'm pretty happy with the way that sounded. So yeah, the last thing, let's save again. So the last thing we're going to do here is build some swells. So to do that, we have we actually have more than that. You know, you can pull, you can do some, you know, interesting things with signal chain here and do this, but I'm not going to get into that for this video. I'm just going to copy my Glitz Verb and paste it in. So I've got another instance of it. I'm just going to make it last longer and I'm going to make it more of a mix. It's like 10% more. So when you turn this mix on now, this is just the second Glitz reverb. It's big and it lasts a long time. All right, and then you're gonna drive this thing with a delay. So come in here to the stereo delays. I really have enjoyed using this Multitap 4 delay. It can be a little confusing because it's like an entire page of parameters, but this is what you need to know. You set the initial time. I like to set it around 1.2. It doesn't really matter. I would not set this to lock into your tempo because if you're playing a slow song, this will wash forever. If you're playing a fast song, it will make the wash less. So I like to keep it where it is. Feedback, you want it to be pretty high. Diffusion, I like to experiment with turning this up. This will make all the delays mush into each other, diffuse into one another. Again, you can sculpt the tone with low and high cuts. And then I like to set the mix pretty good, pretty high, maybe like around 40, 45, somewhere in there. So this is where you get creative with it. The tap 1 is like these taps are the delays, right? So set scale 1 to 100%, keep the panning all the way left. Level at 100, that just means it's 100% of this level, this mix level. Tap 2, change it to 67%. Again, it would 66.66, but you can go 67. Keep the panning where it is, keep the level where it is. Tap 3 scale, go to 33%. Keep everything the same. Tap 4 scale, go to 25%. So what this is going to do is give you sort of a pattern delay in stereo that like really goes and goes and goes. So let me turn the reverb off. So all you're hearing is this multi-tap delay. Oh, and turn your trails on. And let's not use modulation yet. We'll talk about it later. It sounds a little weird. That's the diffusion that's making it wong like that. So if you turn that off, you would get more of just a delay. Right? So you can hear they're kind of like doing this thing and they just keep going. If you turn the feedback up, you know, you can determine how long this goes and how long this will drive the reverb. Okay, so I'm going to turn this diffusion back up. High cut. I'm going to give it a little bit of modulation. So chorus, and let's turn the depth not too high. I don't want to go crazy with it. So it's a big ambient thing, all right? Maybe that's a little too much feedback. But if you put this delay after it and do swells with it, it's big and it lasts a long time. So you can, depending on how long you want your swell to go, you can adjust this feedback level and then this decay level here. So I'm going to set all of these to go to foot switch, not all of these, just both of these. I'm going to set them to go to foot switch 5, both of them. And then I'm going to call foot switch 5, I'm going to call it Swells. All right, so now I've got a Swells foot switch, so anytime I push that button, it will turn those two effects on and off, and I can swell. All right, so as that washes underneath me, let's add one more thing. Let's turn that off. Let's add some modulation, shall we? All right, so we can do, Bradford's favorite would be tremolo. There's a lot of different tremolo options here. Just the basic tremolo sounds, I like it a lot. You don't really need to adjust much to it. All right, I'm a fan of chorus myself, so I'm gonna turn on a little bit of hall reverb here and just dial in this chorus. The 70s chorus is what I meant to choose. It's like the old Boss, is it CE2? I think that's what it is. I don't know, that big greenish looking Boss pedal. It sounds pretty good, so it's very creamy, I like that. So I'll leave it at chorus, and then you just change the mix to sort of suit. So the last thing we can do is just kind of do another spot check and make sure this sounds like we want it to sound. That sounds pretty good to me. If you want, if you want more drive, that might be too much drive for you, depending on how you like to set things up. The one thing that I kind of think when I hear this is it's still maybe a little muddy. And that's easy to fix. You can pull the bass off here. Maybe give it a little more of this reverb. Sounds pretty good to me. I would go with this all day long. So if you do like, that's, your typical worship song sort of rhythm thing, use the tube screamer. Why don't we put some big reverb and delay on that? It sounds like this. Feels like there's a little bit of mud in this thing that I want to get rid of. You can low cut a little more, and it might just be to pull some more bass out of the amp. You might try a different IR. This was the Fathead mic, which adds a lot of body to it. You might try this 101 SM45. That was pretty good. Yeah, maybe I liked it how it was. Here's where you enter the land of never-ending tweaking. But if you land on this kind of a tone right here, I think you're going to be pretty happy. One thing we haven't really done here is do the snapshots. So let's just make a clean snapshot that sounds, like this. It's dotted eighth delay and hall verb, so you can just right click and rename that, call it clean. You can paste snap 1 into snap 2, and then just turn on a drive. Rename that to drive 1. Does this look familiar if you have a worship tutorials patch? This is what they are. All right, and so then you're going from, you know, and then so on and so forth. Just build them out, whatever sounds that you want. Another neat trick that you can do, let's see, where do I have room to do this? I have to maneuver some things. Let's just put our swells stuff. So if you want more room in a row, you can do this. So the signal will come down here, go through these things, and come back up. And then you can add more stuff in here. So what you can do is you can add a gain block to, now we don't have much DSP, but this doesn't need much DSP. So you go volume, keep it in stereo, add a gain block, and then you can add, you know, say 3 dB of gain. And then what you're getting here is you're getting a pure volume boost at the end of your chain. So if you want a solo tone that sounds exactly like a rhythm tone, just louder, you can add this gain block in, and then you can punch it. So let's give you an example. Let's assign that to, let's take our chorus and unassign it from foot switch 11. And then let's assign the bypass of this gain block to foot switch 11. So now we just have gain. We can call it 2D or 3 dB, a 3 dB boost. That's what we're gonna call it. All right, so now when we're playing, you know, say we've got like our tube screamer and, you know, just the hall verb and the dotted eighth delay. It feels like this whole patch got a lot louder. I don't know if this, this signal chain maneuvering did that or not. Let's look at the levels. It sure did. So what you can do then to compensate for that is come to the amp and just turn your channel volume down. Remember, -9 was where it... There we go. So let's do that same experiment where we're gonna play some rhythm stuff and then just boost it for a gain, and you don't change anything else. In some cases, that's going to sound better and cleaner and actually more present in a mix than adding another overdrive, which can often make things a little muddier and you know, wolfier, for lack of a better word. So there it is, building a patch together from scratch. Link below to get that free AC30 patch, which is pretty much exactly the same as what I just built here. Hopefully this has taught you a few things about building patches in the Helix. If you have any questions, let me know below. If you want me to go into like reverbs, drives, anything in a little more depth, I'll get Bradford over here whenever, you know, the coronavirus will let us sort of mingle with one another again, hopefully soon. And we can do some stuff together talking about different components in the Helix. Until then, see you next time. Bye.